Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Because Cannabis podcast every single Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube, every Thursday on Spotify, and anywhere that you listen to your audio podcast. Do us a favor, right off the rip, hit that subscription button. Go ahead, put the finger down. Yes. Click it, hit subscribe on YouTube, hit follow on Spotify, or wherever you're listening. We would appreciate that. Helping spread the word of Wayward indeed is what we're looking for. My name is B.C. Wehman. It's only one box today. Dustin Kava, I don't know, on special assignment, no showing. We'll see what his excuse is next week when he shows up to miss our great guest that we have today. Super excited to talk with Matt Iarussi from CannAClean.com. Going to talk a little logistics. Going to talk a little bit about keeping your place super clean. Maybe we'll delve into the 5 S's. I love to talk a little sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and sustainment. Talking lean, talking manufacturing operations in the cultivation industry. You know what's happened? This is what happens. Maybe the more you consume cannabis, maybe the deeper you get into the show, into the product, or into the show, whatever you're getting deep into, rolling in the deep like Adele, however you're rocking it. When you start to consume a lot of anything, right, you start to get a little pickier. You start to say, yeah, I'll take it if you're giving it for free. But then at some point, has this happened to you yet? Has someone offered you a free product? Maybe rolled up with something that they got. They got a little pre-roll. They got a little kind of ground up product. They're like, yo, bro, you want to have a sesh? I don't know why they call you bro. You want to smoke a little bit and you roll it up and it's really brown. Brings that little frown. And you say no. Have you turned down free weed? That's how you know you've crossed this point of no return when it comes to weed snobbery. I might be there. I'm not sure yet. I still enjoy, as Ohio's products become more and more quality into our medicinal market, about to hit the adult use market, I still enjoy very much going to the dispensary. And now when I get the stuff from my dude, I realize I need a better dude. Maybe I need someone like Matt Iarussi. Maybe I need someone to hook me up, right? Someone that knows what to do. Because I don't know. I've gotten to the point now where when I get product, I go through it. I may even look up lab results, which is a good thing to do. I may check out terpene profiles, also a quality thing to do. But just 2-3 years ago, I was a get what you get, but don't throw a fit kind of fellow when it came to cannabis. I took it, I smoked it, and now I start to raise that eyebrow. Have you gotten to that point? We're talking with Matt Iarussi from CannAClean.com. Have you gotten to that point yet, Matt, where you someone rolls up, they're like, hey, man, you want to try some of this? Like, do you need to say, hey, show me a COA or what's the deets? When someone rolls up with the freebies, are you so deep in the weed snobbery, Matt, that you turn down free weed?
Yeah, I turn down free weed all the time.
I knew it. Yep. You strike me as a fella. We'll get all Matt's deets, CannAClean.com. You can find the link below. We'll get into what Matt's doing. But off the rip, this is how you know how Matt rolls. Weed snob. Does that feel bad? Is that an insult for me to call you a weed snob, Matt?
No, it's not an insult, but everybody takes it a little bit differently. Sometimes people get offended when you don't smoke their joint or you don't want to try their wares. But, you know, I've been growing a long time and trying a lot of different products for a long time, whether it be legacy products or some recreational products, but never been super impressed. I grow my own, make my own seeds, like to make my own hash, my own full melt. So really just, once you have the top shelf, it's hard to drop down shelves and enjoy stuff from the lower shelves, to be honest with you. It's not my favorite.
I would say based off that answer, Matt, you are super deep in there. But it's okay, right? If you own it as like a badge of honor, you're like, look, this is what I got and this is what I enjoy. And but it does, and it's weird because cannabis is a very social thing. It's way more social. No one cracks open like this brand new IPA and they're like, yeah, take a sip. I mean, it's possible to happen, I suppose, plausible, but unlikely where people openly share like an alcohol that they're drinking and such. But when it comes to cannabis, it is like, look what I made, try this. And it's hard sometimes because you develop kind of a taste. You develop a weed snobbishness to yourself. And now you have all these folks. Do you feel like they get disappointed if you kind of don't consume it? Or are you this good, Matt, that you just consume it, tell them it's the dankest, and then just walk away and kind of like swallow it down a little bit?
Yeah, no, I usually won't even hit it. I usually show. I usually roll up with my own. So like when somebody's like, "Oh, you want to smoke this stuff I got from so and so place?" I'm like, "Oh, why don't you try this? This is something I did." And I showed up to a family party the other night with 7 joints rolled up and just passed a few out. And had a few of my own, and just like, I know that crew in my family is hitting the dispensaries, and it's not something that I'm, really wanting to try. You know what I mean? If I wanted to try it, I'd drive down the street and buy some, but it's just never been my thing. And I also, you have to remember, I'm coming from a place where I work in these facilities, and I also see what's going on inside, and I see the environmental issues, and I see mold infestations, and it's like, there's a lot of remediation going on in Massachusetts too. And I want to know like who's who and what are they doing to adulterate their product. And if I don't know that, I don't want to put it in my body. It's just how I am about it.
I think that's a super valid point. All right, let's get to that great transition segue of sorts. Matt Iarussi, COO of Canna Klean, cannaclean.com. You can find the link below. So give us the pitch. Give us the elevator pitch of when someone asks you, hey, what is Canna Klean? What do you tell them?
So Canna Klean is a couple different things, but one of the main things we do is we decontaminate cultivation facilities. So when, an operator has issues passing testing for mold and microbial contamination, we come in, we do what we call contamination mapping. We use third-party industrial hygienists if the issue is that severe. We bring them in. They're like the science team that does all of the environmental testing, and it's all done through a third-party lab. We come in once the testing is done. After the vectors are identified and the speciated, we know what we're targeting. We come in and do the cleaning and the decon, and then the IH comes back and gives us clearance tests. Two other things we do is, number one is 24/7 disaster response. So just like a normal restoration company for homes and buildings, we come in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for any type of water damage, sewer damage, electrical outage causing high humidity events, fire damages. We direct bill insurance companies. We deal with the adjusters. And the last thing that we do that is pretty cool service is we do flower room turnovers. So when a facility is done with their flower run and they cut down their plants, we come in behind them and we do a full decon of the room, and we do a flower room turnover for them, so they don't have to use their facility labor. They can worry about, working on the plants and all that important plant work that makes them money.
I love what you're doing with Canna Klean. I'm probably not OCD. I'm a huge fan of cleanliness, right? And so it's super particular. But let's play devil's advocate first, and then we'll get to the praising you, as Fat Boy Slim said later on. What do you say to the folks who maybe they're legacy growers, maybe they're just old school, maybe they don't understand how this service and what the importance of this service is, and you're talking a lot of, throwing a lot of, buzzwords out there with remediation and these other terms, like people who don't get that side of it, or those who maybe just don't appreciate what this type of service can offer to a cultivator. What do you say to the naysayers when they talk about your industry or what you're trying to do with Canna Klean?
Well, the naysayers, there's a lot of operators that'll say, oh, I'll clean it myself. And that's fine. They can do that. But at the end of the day, we can do it faster for a better price with chemistries that are not going to affect any plants in that building. We use things like botanical-based chemistries, hydrogen peroxide-based chemistries. So really it comes down to breaking the biofilm matrix in that room. So we'll say we're talking about a flower room. Any naysayer is going to say, oh, well, it looks clean. The facility looks clean. Well, it's not about what you can see. It's about what you can't see. And that's where mold and microbials hide, right? So like if we're talking about HVAC coils, like a lot of people say like, oh yeah, my system's super clean. I'll open up the HVAC and there's literally things colonizing the coil.
It's
right?
It's like an episode of like Weed Rescue. It's like Bar Rescue or Gordon Ramsay walking into one of those kitchen nightmare shows, or when Taffert with his big eyeballs walks in and starts screaming at people. I feel like, I know you got to be a little nicer about that, but I feel like that's what it's like. They're like, yeah, we're doing really good here. And there's a close up and you're like, pull it open. And it's like, like a horror show. Is it literally like that where they feel so confident sometimes and you're like, well, hold on, let's peel back the layer, and then it's like, oh my gosh, all this stuff is sitting like coils. I would imagine like oscillating fans probably get up a lot of stuff. People aren't, those are usually up high and no one thinks to get up and get the back of those off, get that dust, which then just sprays around there. Are there folks who just are, I guess, oblivious or ignorant to that they have some serious cleanliness issues that could be affecting the quality of their plant?
Sometimes, it all depends on their practices. Some facilities really go after it and they really care about cleanliness, and they put the money into a sanitation team that's, specifically focused on the facility sanitation. And then there's others that let things slip. And, I don't know if it's anybody's fault. I think a lot of it's just, bad practices in general that have been adopted over time and they've never really evolved. And now that cannabis has evolved into such a, a large market, and obviously lab testing comes into play. Me, myself, I came from the legacy market, and I'm going to be real with you. Like when I started having to pass, the Massachusetts state testing, it's a different ballgame because, anything can fail you in Mass. It's a very, very difficult market to pass testing in. It's actually one of the hardest in the country. And, that's one of the reasons Canna Klean's kind of, put our roots down in Massachusetts, not only because I live here and my partners live here, but it's a state that needs the help. A lot of the times operators usually call us in a reactive situation. Most don't call me unless they're having a problem, which we're trying to, get out in front of this and also help them realize that preventative maintenance is actually cheaper in the long run than having to do a building remediation, which it is. So, coming in and handling, your routine cleanings, we'll call them, whether that be quarterly or biannual, just to keep the biofilm in the building down and at a manageable level, will also help their lab tests. And we've seen that in what we do. And it really, at the end of the day, the lab tests make or break an operation. So like I said, when they call me, they usually have like $100,000 of weed they can't sell sitting there, and they're scratching their heads as to why, because it's a microbial issue or a mold issue causing it, and they might not see it. And they also don't understand how it works. And I didn't understand how it worked, to be honest with you, until I worked at a facility that was contaminated. And I learned the ins and outs of navigating a building contamination from working side by side with my business partners as well. They've been in restoration for, since the late 80s and then, early 2000s for the other gentleman. So, I mean, we're talking years and years of experience with this.
It's really interesting because I think when people, they hear things like testing results, for example, that's something people talk a lot about, and they're like, I really need to have this tested. Or on the other side, you have places, like Massachusetts, where in Ohio, where I am at, which also has very stringent and particular testing results, very, very low parts per million on a lot of different things like heavy metals, one of the toughest in the country, to my understanding. So it is interesting when people, start to hear those things and they hear test results. But I find, Matt, and this is what's really interesting, I find that a lot of, consumers appreciate test results, but I don't think that they, dig into them and use them. And on the other side, I feel like cultivators could probably do a better job with their test results, not only, and this is something to help sell the process, not only to, have a better understanding of what's in their plant, have better marketing opportunities. Do you like the really stringent test results? Do you wish, Oregon, Rhode Island have a little bit more lax test results and such? Do you appreciate a state that has that, or does it frustrate you when you're thinking about that? Obviously, it's Canna Klean, you like it because you want to go it there. But if you think you were growing on that level, if you had a space, do you think it's good to have super, super strict test results, or should we be more lax in the industry with the kind of the product?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, honestly, because there's no real science behind what happens when you ignite the mold or what happens when you ignite microbials or pesticides, because cannabis has been federally illegal. So there's not a lot of people testing these things, but you could always look at like big tobacco, what their allowances are. And, people have been smoking tobacco all throughout time here, but obviously tobacco is not quote unquote medicinal, where I know cannabis is being looked at a little bit differently because the plant is sought out by people looking to use it as a medication as well, not just a recreational item to get you high. So, in my opinion, species specific testing needs to happen. So like right now in Massachusetts, you have total counts. So like total yeast and mold count, total aerobic bacteria count. You got bile tolerant, gram negative. You got, your stec E. coli, salmonella, all the basics there. And then a couple different mycotoxins, ochratoxin, aflatoxin, right? Which can be produced by, things like Aspergillus, penicillium molds that can be pathogenic to people with immunocompromised issues. So really, like when you're looking at like 10,000 CFUs of yeast and mold, right? What's in that? What are the species? What are the species in it, right? And I'm not saying that like smoking mold is a good idea, because it's not. But at the end of the day, cannabis is not a sterile thing. There is a microbiome living on the exterior of the flowers, no matter which way you look at it, whether it be aerobic bacteria, it would be yeast and mold, right? There's going to be a level on there at all times. What level is dangerous, and what species are we actually targeting to say, as humans, we should not be consuming those in a combustion type situation, right? So like species specific testing would say, okay, if we're looking for Aspergillus fumigatus, for example, right, which is one of the pathogenic, species, that's a dangerous game if you're smoking that. I mean, I don't want to smoke that, right? But at the end of the day, like with a total count, it basically limits operators and it limits cultivators to their toolbox of things they can use to combat issues on their plants. Because some people actually use, bacteria and things that'll pop on the plate or on qPCR tests that is beneficial to the plant and not necessarily harmful to a human, right? So it's not distinguishing when you have a total count what's good and what's bad. Another thing that's being talked a lot about is the false positives happening from things like gram-positive bacteria causing gram-negative bacteria numbers to inflate on tests, when in reality, it's not even gram-negative. It's actually gram-positive bacteria. So I feel like there's a lot of, we'll say variances happening across lab testing due to different standards being used, but also due to different states having a different outlook on what's safe and what's not. Like if I go across the border to Connecticut, they're allowing 100,000 CFUs of yeast and mold. But if there was 100,000 CFUs of Aspergillus or Penicillium, or like Penicillium citrinum, for example, which is another, systemic pathogenic issue that can cause people extreme harm if they smoke it, what does Connecticut know that Massachusetts doesn't know? That's my question, right? Like if you go across the country and you look at Michigan, 100,000 in Michigan, but only 10,000 in Massachusetts. What do they know that we don't know?
I don't think it's anything, right? And I think this is proven in time because of the federal illegality, because of where we're sitting. States kind of make up their rules and then they copy another state's rules. They look at some other ones and then they modify it, and then politics gets in the way and people have opinions on this. And so there is no magic set. There is not that standard. Do you want like some sort of testing agency? Would you love like federal regulated standards for testing? Like it has to hit this, it has to do that. Do you think that's what this industry needs to be more medicinal? Or is that just a hassle of a plant that's been smoked a long time and you got what you got and you've had whatever mold was on it, man? I had no idea the stuff I've been smoking for many, 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 many years from my dudes that I have experience from my 20s to my 50s now, right? There's a lot of dudes along the way. Not a gender thing, just most of them were. A lot of people along the way who like have given me, I had no idea what it was, right? So is the industry need that to take the step forward? Is that the legitimacy that makes other folks do that, to be similar to alcohol and tobacco? I mean, they have standards as well for that, but there are standards, right? There can be a certain percentage, 0.02 or whatever parts per million of rat feces and things. All that stuff's allowed technically by testing. Is that what it needs, or should it be more lenient?
I think it needs something like that. I mean, just to standardize across the board, so we're all, talking the same language, and really everybody is kind of, have to follow the same rules, right? And I'm not saying, federal oversight is what I want. I mean, at the end of the day, I've been a legacy grower my whole life. Like I prefer no oversight when I was younger, right? But obviously, once in a while you got handcuffed, right? So there was somebody.
That's the problem. The industry's always like fighting the man, at the same point.
Yeah, there was always something that was causing you grief, in those days. And now, one thing I will say about that is like without the oversight of some kind, what it's causing is like what we just saw in California is this increase in pesticide use. And also people are trying to skate by the legalities of using, restricted pesticides that are not supposed to be using, right? Which in my opinion, like which is going to cause more harm? Is the heavy use of pesticides, or is the chronic exposure to the mold causing more harm? That is kind of what we need to weigh out here, because when you restrict people too hard and you restrict these things so hard that people have to go to great lengths, like dousing their product with whatever they may be using, right, to actually pass this test, what's hurting the end consumer more in the long run? I don't know the answer to that. But something that is causing people to dunk their weed in certain chemistries at the end to give it like a bud wash, right? I've seen people do that in hydrogen peroxide, tanks of hydrogen peroxide, where all your trichomes are just oxidizing off and you have this soup of trichomes at the bottom of the H2O2 barrel. So the weed itself is dropping in quality while you're actually trying to wash the flower to pass the test. So like where do we draw the line with this stuff is my question. You know, like not to hit you with a question here, but in my opinion, like the actual oversight of federal legalization, it may help, but at the same time, it may hurt, right? We don't really know.
I think it can't be bad to be over stringent on testing, right? I take a look at anything that I consume and put in my body. When I go to the gas station and buy a Snickers bar, or when I go to a place and I buy something, I like to know that there are regulated standards in some form of them, right? And I think the other part that happens in cannabis is, unfortunately, and I think we all know this, there is a little bit of, I don't want to say shenanigans, but there's testing shenanigans. It may not be a direct shenanigan, like you're like slipping a cash envelope under the door when no one's looking shenanigans, but it could be there's multiple state places available to you, you know, multiple licensees that you're allowed to visit within the state. Most states set that up. And you go to one and it gives you a result. And you're like, all right, you go to another one, it gives you a better result, whatever that is. Typically, let's go potency and then maybe the other ones. And then you find them and you're like, I like you. And you don't tend to keep shopping, right? You tend to find one that gives you what you like. And you're like, well, we'll settle here. We'll do a little handshake and go. So I feel like, and, you know, there's a whole nother issue if we deal with like different labs using different machines, you know, gas chromatography versus high pressure liquid and what that does to test. There's a whole nother argument about what different machines being used to get these test results can produce. So I think a regulated form of some kind would be ideal. I don't know where it falls, because what happens then is everyone's going to have their opinion, right? You're going to have what you're just dealing with in Massachusetts at 10,000, in Michigan or whatever, Connecticut at 100,000, and everyone's going to say, well, if you go lower in those states, you know, you'll have some other states like Massachusetts or even Ohio is very, very strict as well. Say, why, you know, should we go up? Like they're putting out, in my opinion, I don't think Massachusetts is a terrible rule. Like they're putting out better product at the dispensary level, healthier, let's say safer. Well, let's not say better, but safer products. But it is interesting you mentioned that, and this is a really great debate that I have never really thought about, is the more you push them to hit these results, the more likely they are to do EPA-approved chemicals that'll probably help them pass the results. And the reality is using some of these organic fertilizers and pesticides could put certain, as you mentioned, like certain chemicals or certain types of natural fungi or mold or something that you may, not mold, but, you know, natural ingredients that you may not think of in your body because it's in the pesticide and stuff like that. And so it discourages really holistic growth. It discourages that. It encourages mass growth with the cheapest bottom line possible, which is chemicals, right? It encourages that by forcing these strict standards. So I hadn't really considered the other side of it, that if I force you to hit this number, you're going to do it by any means possible, which is not the result we're trying to find. Cannabis is anti that. It's interesting.
Right. It just kind of goes against the whole point of it being a holistic medication for people, because like now everybody's scrambling trying to pass these stringent tests, when in reality, like, you know, what is really actually hurting us worse? I don't know the answer to that. Like, I'm not a scientist whatsoever, but from the stuff that I'm seeing out in the field and, you know, what people are doing for IPM regimens because their building is contaminated, for example, like people need to learn to solve for root cause. Like if you're looking at your COAs, right? You're looking at your COAs and you're like, okay, I'm starting to see noise here on total yeast and mold. I'm starting to see noise here on aerobic bacteria. The first thing you need to do is come to terms with the fact that you may have a problem that's arising in the facility. You may have an air quality issue. You may have an environmental concern, or you have dirty spray equipment. I've seen that happen before, right? Your dirty spray equipment can actually pass aerobic bacteria, and now you're thinking you're applying a pesticide for a fix, but you're actually contaminating your crop. So like there's so much to it. And you know, preventative maintenance programs and deep cleaning programs for these equipment pieces, you know, talking about spray equipment specifically, that is one of the number one culprits I see. I go into facilities sometimes, like, how do you clean your sprayer? Oh, we don't clean the sprayer. Okay, like, well, great, excellent. You know what I mean? That's not good. You need to clean the sprayer. like the pesticide that you're spraying does not clean the sprayer and the internals of the tank. You need to strip what's inside the tank off with some type of a pesticide cleaning agent. You know, then you need a rinse. Then you need to sanitize. Like, you know, always clean before disinfecting. You know, ABDC.
Oh, I like that.
Sorry,
we got acronyms.
ACBD.
Everyone loves good acronyms.
Yeah.
Matt Iarussi, COO, Canna Klean, cannaclean.com, talking like how to get your place running efficiently, how to make more money, right? In a time when, cannabis prices, especially in states that have been around for a bit, Michigan and such, are as low as they've been in a long time. So as prices get lower at the register, that means behind the scenes is where you're going to probably have to make adjustments to make money. And so how to do this, making more profit, making sure you get through it. COO or Matt Iarussi and his Canna Klean team are definitely part of that. Do you have I don't know, without naming names, 'cause we can't do that, but you drop some. Everyone loves a good horror story. Basically, everyone loves a good like worst case example. We won't throw them under the bus, or maybe you can. Who knows? What's like one of the worst situations you walked into? I just want to hear like oh my, like when you stopped, you had to call people, you had to take pictures, you had to be like, man, I would post this on the internet if it wasn't against me. Like this shit would go viral. Like, have you seen a few instances that would make people? Because we've seen those on those bar rescues or kitchen nightmares. There's always some where you go, God, I've eaten there, like I've eaten that place, and this is
Yeah.
what the kitchen looks like. Have you seen a few of those?
Yeah, I've seen many of them, and I don't like ever to name names. Obviously, they're my clients, and out of respect for them, But if you want to talk about one that just hit the news recently, because I used to work there, obviously as the grower, but secondly, we actually ended up fixing that building, right? So Holistic Industries, right, in Massachusetts, they just hit. MJ Biz did a piece on them recently about mold infestation issues, lab shopping, right? So I'm not going to really comment on any of that. What I am going to comment on, though, is the fact that, anybody that's doing reporting, they need to get the whole story. So Holistic got a fine, for $200,000 in Massachusetts from the CCC. Okay. Now, in all the articles that are written, unfortunately, nobody's talking about what they did to fix the building. Everybody's only talking about, this stuff here. They're talking about all the bad stuff. This is like a piece that's not complete, in my opinion, right?
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So Holistic actually fixed their building. Okay. I was part of that, and my company was part of it. So basically, they hired my company to fix the actual building. I left Holistic to go work for Canna Klean. Okay. I met my business partners at Holistic. So a company called Floodfire Pro was hired to fix the building. I worked side by side with them on this project, and the remediation was done on that building. There was millions of dollars put into this remediation. They killed their entire crop. So when I tell you these guys did the right thing, they did the right thing. And unfortunately, the way the news is written these days, and I don't know if it's like a slander piece or whatever you want to call it, but we've been behind the scenes kind of watching this unfold. And that's why I wanted to bring it up, because at the end of the day, when a company does the right thing, the entire story needs to be talked about, not just one piece of it, because they're talking about something that happened in 2021, but we're in 2024 now. What happened between 2021 and 2024 for Holistic to do the right thing and get their product back to market cleanly and compliantly? So like I said, that's probably one of the worst horror stories, because that building had what they call a building envelope issue. The roof was contaminated. The exterior of the building was contaminated because the vapor barrier was incorrectly placed against the concrete block. There was, all sorts of drainage issues. And what happened was the water was coming towards the building and wicking up into the concrete, causing water infiltration. Now, whenever you do a remediation, the first thing you have to do is stop water infiltration, because water fuels mold colonies, right? Water is a source that can, number one, bring mold into the building, but number two, help to keep and maintain a moist environment. And that's what mold likes to thrive on. So the first thing that has to happen is all those water infiltration need to stop. And then once those are stopped, the roof was completely replaced in that building. Gigantic roof, like sardine canned, ripped off the building.
Just ripped her all the way off and put a whole new one back on?
Off, every layer. We remediated the layers of the building, the actual roof layers as they were taking it off. And it was 100% replacement, right? So like none of this stuff is being talked about. And I feel bad for Holistic, because they were good to me. I worked there for years, and, there's no bad blood of any kind. It's like, I don't understand why they didn't talk about the positive parts, because
It's just not
if any,
sexy. It's not news, right?
no,
News is
no,
sold on the horror and the bad. It's never. That's why, yeah, your local news and your internet feed is not filled with all the great successes in life. It's filled with, oh my god, or even a good true crime podcast. Whatever the solve is, takes you 8
yep,
episodes to get to there, right? They got to fill you with all the dread and misery.
yep.
So I think it's quite simply, it's just not a sexy click versus, oh my God, do you see all this mold and lawsuits? And now, in looking through this article, we'll put a link to this article as well from MJ Biz Daily. It just broke a few days ago before Matt and I are having this conversation. So you can kind of read the article, and it does kind of talk about it. And we'll give, just to put a couple different facts out there as well. Holistic talks about that all the product they sold was past testing and such. But to me, the biggest surprise as I'm reading and you're talking is that it was multiple years ago. And this is just breaking now. And so, to your point, you have this company, right? You have this company that went through this process, did the right thing, hired Canna Klean, got Matt and his team in there, cleaned it out. And you just heard the multitude of ways that they took care of that building, including ripping off the roof and getting into there. And so, to put this out 3 years after the fact, when they've taken all the necessary steps, paid their fines, which is probably why it's hitting now, because all that now that it's settled, fine money is getting, taken care of and such. But it's interesting. I do want to point this out from the article, Matt. I'm assuming it's not you. It does say that there was like whistleblowers, like the staff came forward, which I want to comment. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that staff had that. I'd rather have, the entry-level employees, your trimmers and folks who are probably consuming more cannabis than maybe the COOs in general and such. Not that all of them don't, but they're there because they love it. They're getting paid a lower wage to trim plants all the day because they love cannabis and they're part of this society. So I'm not shocked and kind of happy, because some staff will put their head down. And I think it's good for staff to know that you have the ability, if things are going wrong, you should let people know. But that's interesting that happened. Some staff pointed it out and such. But it is really interesting that they paid the fine. Years later, it's coming out, and the place is good again, right? It's back. It's clean.
Right.
You got them selling high-quality product again.
Right, and that's the whole point, is like, we brought industrial hygienists into that building. So anything we do with the third party, because we're doing the cleanup and the decon. We can't do the testing and the cleanup and the retesting, because that's a bias situation, right? So we bring in a third-party science team that we're not financially tied to whatsoever. There's no kickbacks. There's no referral bullshit, nothing like that. It's literally straightforward. They come in, they're quoting the client on their own. They're doing their own set of work. They're bringing us scientific protocol and also letting us know specifically what species we're dealing with, what's the levels and the quantity of those species, where they're located, where the vectors are. We come in behind the IH team, do the remediation. Once we're done with the remediation and all of our containment systems are still up, right? We have to shut down our negative air blowers, which are all HEPA filtrated, for at least 48 hours. The IH team comes back and they try and make us fail. They try, okay? They're going to look through, obviously they look at air, services, they do microbial tape lifts. They go hard, okay? They go through the building.
Wow, they really white glove you, huh?
Oh, they white glove the shit out of you. This is
wow.
not a game. Yeah, this, you have to remember, like, this is our name, like our company's name. Like, we have what we say we're going to do, we have to do, and we have to complete at 100%. And if they come back in that containment zone and we fail, we have to remediate the entire containment zone. So that costs us money, okay?
Yeah.
And we've done that. We've done that before, because that happens at times, okay? Sometimes things slip through. You have to remediate again, okay? So basically what I'm saying is there was pre-tests, remediation, and clearance tests done everywhere, every zone in that entire building. So when we left there, that building was 100% back to baseline levels, and baseline levels are obviously compared to outdoor levels, because outdoor levels, the indoor space can never be higher than your outdoor levels, because then obviously you have a problem. Okay. So there's always yeast and mold. There's always bacteria in the air outside. Every day you walk outside, you breathe it in. Okay. No matter what. And some days are worse than others, depending on the time of year, depending on the wind, depending on what's
my
blooming.
eyeballs can tell you full well when those times of the year are. My eyeballs and my nose.
Yep.
It's about 2 months ago. You would have known that full well here in Ohio.
Yep. So that's why I wanted to talk about this building, and specifically because it was a very large job that we did. I have a special place in my heart for that company. I worked there. They were good to me. And at the end of the day, it hurt me to see negative press come out against them, especially because our company help them fix that problem. And nobody, and I'm not saying this for like press, right? I'm not saying this for like, oh, give Canna Klean a pat on the back. I'm saying it for it holistic, like saying they did the right thing. And everybody needs to understand the full picture before they start like slandering companies, because at the end of the day, shit happens in old retrofitted buildings. It happens more than anybody can even imagine. And sometimes it happens really bad and things hit the press, and sometimes it doesn't, and people keep smoking the weed and they don't know, right? So at the end of the day, I just wanted to put that out there that they did the right thing, and we were involved in helping them fix that building.
So let's give away some free advice here, Matt. What are some things, like what are some like really high level things? You know, there's some obviously, you know, some basic stuff you can Google on the internet and such. But when you walk into a facility, do you have like a common like 1-2 problem, top 1-2-3, or something that's just missed all the time? You know, besides kind of we know we should be preventative maintenance and do those things, but what is maybe a top problem area or a very common thing that maybe someone, if they're listening right now, can say, all right, I should hit pause. Go check out that dial. Go check this number. Go check this valve to make sure it's not doing anything. What are some super common areas that people just forget about or miss, like those ceiling fans and HVAC coils?
Yep. So the biggest one I will say for infiltration wise is roof leaks in general. So something I see a lot of in these older buildings is water staining damage or actual active roof leaks, and it happens a lot in these retrofitted buildings. Number 2 is definitely HVAC system cleanliness. That's obviously like all your air is recirculating in these rooms. And if your HVAC's not clean, you're just regurgitating bacteriological issues or mold issues back into your grow facility. The third would be your irrigation systems. Sometimes irrigation systems, people think like, oh, okay, I have an ozone generator. My irrigation system's fine. I don't need to shock treat it. Don't need to clean it. I don't have biofilms. It's like, well, you most likely you do. And really like that kind of like the air approach, obviously your HVAC system, the C approach, which is your water system, and your land approach, which is like all of your surfaces are not being cleaned properly, whether that be your floor, your aisles, your grow tables, things of that nature. We actually partner with a company called Clean Theory as well, and they're a chlorine dioxide distributor. And those are their kind of 3 key pieces. And, you know, what they're looking at when they go into a cannabis facility is how do you treat the air? How do you treat the water? How do you treat your surfaces? Because those are kind of your 3 modes that are going to cause contamination issues to your crop. And, you know, like I'm saying, like at the end of the day, you could clean all you want, right? You could clean all day long. A lot of people aren't using the right chemistries to clean. They're not using the right chemistries with the proper contact time. So they think they're cleaning when in reality, they might just be moving a bunch of grime around and thinking
And that's a huge waste of like payroll too. That's the other part of this, right? If you're spending a lot of time, you know, human beings are probably one of your biggest expenses as a cultivator. And so if you're having them clean, but they're not really cleaning, they're just, I love that definition, moving shit from one side to the other, back and forth, putting it back in the air so it can just resettle again. So I love, you mentioned earlier, the cleaning, then decontaminating, right? So don't just put that, you know, decontamination on top of some dirty whatever, because it's just now decontaminated dirty stuff. Like you didn't really solve a lot of things. It is interesting, right? As more companies, you know, get bigger and bigger, which they're going to need more services, you know, kind of like this, kind of helping them do more efficiency, you know, work with the flower rooms and such. What is right now, Matt? You know, I know you're working with Canna Klean. You got all these things going. However, there are some, and I know you don't always get to the dispensaries and such, but do you pay attention to kind of some of the modern trends and stuff that are happening in cannabis, some of the cool science that's happening with maybe some of the process? Is there something in cannabis? Maybe it's a behind the scenes thing. Maybe it's something that you're is coming up in the world of, you know, cleanliness. We got some UV lights in our HVAC ducts and whatnot. Is there anything in cannabis that's happening that's kind of exciting you, or that's firing you up, or you're looking forward to that's happening now or coming in the future?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, Clean Theory, like, you know, we don't just partner with anybody. We don't just speak highly of just any company. And Clean Theory, in my opinion, is one of the top dogs in the industry right now for environmental cleanliness in general. They actually install, you know, tanks inside the facility that hold chlorine dioxide solution, and they run a manifold panel that allows the chlorine dioxide gas to travel through Schedule 80 piping and get distributed by the air handling system. And this is specific to control odors. So a lot of issues are occurring with town ordinances and odor control. So they run a product called Aerox that actually neutralizes the VOCs in the air and handles the odor that leaves the facility, so you don't actually get your neighbors to complain or people to violate their license agreements in towns, right? Also, they have a product called Fertox, which they directly inject into your irrigation system that handles all biofilms and bacteriological issues in your water system. And then they also have the Pathox, which is a titrated tank, an EPA registered pesticide, where people can actually take that liquid sanitizer out of the actual tank. And from there, they can use that to clean things like floors, aisleways, walls, right? And it's similar to like if you were using bleach in your facility, or you were using quaternary ammonium, or whatever it is you may be using to clean, right? This now eliminates all those other things that you need to use and allows you to use chlorine dioxide as a rule. Chlorine dioxide, in my opinion, is one of the best oxidizers in cleaning. I prefer it over ozone. Ozone is very dangerous for humans. This product actually, they bring trucks and generate the chlorine dioxide outside the facility and pump it in every 60 days, where they actually take the old liquid that's in your tank from 60 days ago out and refresh it, because chlorine dioxide in aqueous solution only really lasts for about 60 days. So they're actually making sure that your levels are exact. They're titrated exactly the way they're supposed to be. So you don't have your team trying to do science experiments or dilutions. Everything is diluted for you. And in my opinion, so the model is Canna Klean comes in and brings your facility to baseline with doing our cleaning process, whether that be HEPA vacuuming, using our fogging equipment, right? We have different strategies depending on what we're handling.
Sure.
So we bring the facility back to baseline levels like we're doing in a remediation setting, right? And we get all of the biofilms under control, clean your HVAC system, get everything back down to baseline. Clean Theory comes behind that with their system, and that helps maintain the space in the interim between the quarterly or biannual cleanings from us. Because at the end of the day, when I leave after I do a remediation or a cleaning, right, what's there to maintain the space when I'm not there, when my team's not there? Well, really nothing other than the people that work there doing routine cleanings, right? But what are they using? What chemistries are they using? What's their process? What's their method, right? That's why we wanted to partner with a company like Clean Theory to actually make sure that these facilities are maintained in the interim of us not being there between our cleanings. And it's incredible.
In your kind of maybe not perfect world, I don't know. If you had the ability, if federal legalization happens, who knows, maybe sooner than later, it's probably not, but let's say it does, and it opens up the door for this kind of like across the country aspect, something like a Service Masters or something. You talk about that. Have you, do you fantasize sometimes or think how cool it would be to be across the different things with franchises? Or do you think you as just an owner or someone who's working as a COO at Canna Klean, like you feel like Massachusetts is the place you're going to be? Or is there hopes to expand this model, kind of what you're doing, the name, the franchise of some form across other states?
Yeah, we've actually been talking a lot about that lately. So what we're doing now is we've been kind of proving the model in the Northeast, because obviously that's the easiest place for us to get our crew and our trucks, right? Because obviously proximity can be a problem, right?
Sure.
But right now we will travel if the job is large enough, obviously, and it could make it worthwhile to us. We'll go across the country right now. But obviously the goal is to either franchise. Franchising is tough because sometimes you dilute the brand that way. There's a lot to oversee when you franchise, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So
and you have a lot of up here, right? Like a lot of learned knowledge. You got to be able to give it out to other people to be successful. But it's something that when you have that tight control, you have to ensure that it lives up to standards. And we've all been to a Subway at one, and that's great. And a Subway or whatever franchise you go to, that's terrible. It's usually a human issue, right? It's not the design or the concept. Your concept's great. It's the humans applying said issue or humans applying said tools within the facility in this case. So yeah, it's got to be a harder thing to let go of that baby in that way, because you could lose a lot of trust in the brand.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're worried about. What I've talked about with my partners is like, what gets diluted and how do we know that the process is being followed to a T, right? So privatizing might be the better route. We're not sure yet. But like I said, like right now we're kind of using data and proving what we can do first, because like people finally, it takes a long time for something to take off too, right? Like I've been doing this for about a year and a half, and finally people are like, oh yeah, Canna Klean, I know what they do. And it took a while, right? It took a while to get to that point. Like, oh, I know Matt. I know what he's up to. Yeah, he's a good guy. He's not trying to sell me snake oil. Like because cannabis is a lot of that. Like everybody's got something to sell you, right? But at the end of the day, like you have to have a quality, not just product, but we have a quality service, and we can prove that through science and testing. And that's how we do it. So like with us, it's like not just like, oh yeah, I come in and clean your facility. If you wanted to, we can test the facility and you can see what our service actually does, because you have baseline tests, then our service in the middle, and then clearance tests at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So you can actually see what we've done to the interior of the space through science. So I feel like that's kind of I don't just have like a bottle of something that I sell to you, right? You know, it's different.
That would be awesome though if you're like, here's my Canna Klean. Canna Klean in a bottle sounds a bit snake oily, right? That sounds a bit saying. Like you're but you have the service and you're like, it actually sounds like a product you'd see in a late night infomercial. Get your Canna Klean here. It's interesting because is Holistic Industries, are they up and selling again in Massachusetts?
Yeah, 100%.
I feel like that's a great sales pitch for you right there. Like that kind of thing, it's almost like I would start to use that as part of your marketing. Like the fact that they're selling after all this happened, maybe Canna Klean needs to be more aggressive in telling the folks out there, like, hey, this is the case. Because those are probably your biggest sales points. Like, look what they're doing. Look at where they were. Look at the fact that they're selling legal cannabis again. Look at who got them there. This guy, that guy.
That's what we're trying to do now too. And like, obviously, like, case studies are something that we're trying to kind of put into play as well, because a building like that, for example, with such issues, you can see the turnaround. You can see what happened and how much they had to lose to turn it around, and they had to kill their crop and they had to stop selling product for a very long time. And they came back to market and they have to rebuild their brand again, and obviously their brand integrity. And that's something that's very difficult to do, right? And they're doing it. And I respect that, you know, like I was just at Flower Expo and they were there, you know, and they're pushing their product still, and they're going after it. And, you know, I still know some of the people that work there. They're good people and they want to put out the best quality products.
Because those things, they got lucky that they came back. I was just talking with someone. I don't know if you remember the restaurant chain Chi-Chi's. Like Chi-Chi's was put out of business because of a green onion kind of bacteria scare. It literally, they never recovered from that, right? That moment. And so these things, you know, not every brand, you know, Chipotle, for example, they had a little bit of scares of salmonella up your way, up there in the New England area. They kind of pushed through that. They were able to centralize it. I think they basically threw the franchise, speaking of franchisees, I think they threw that one under the bus and said, franchise problem in that case. But it is true. It's hard if your brand gets there. That's why I love when we're talking with Matt from Canna Klean, cannaclean.com. You can find the link below. That's why I love what you talked about right at the beginning, Matt, as we kind of wrap up, is that aspect of get us now, right? Get Canna Klean now, because when it happens, if you find yourself deep in the shit, right? If you get yourself in a position like Holistic Industries, whatever the reason is, if you find yourself a headline on a negative way, it's going to be very difficult to get back up there, even if Canna Klean comes in and does that. It's going to take a lot of work on your part to rebuild trust in the community. So I think that's the biggest selling point of companies like Canna Klean is get it now. Like, don't wait. Get in there. Let us get the check. Let us get you going. Find something like Clean Theory to get you progressing forward. But when it happens, and that's the problem, people wait, and then it hits, and then they go under because they can't recover. So I think, Matt, with Canna Klean and cannaclean.com, find the link in the comments below. Get it now, right? Call them now if you're in Massachusetts or out that area, because you don't want to wait. I bet you it feels sometimes like sad. Do you feel bad sometimes? You know, kind of wrap up. Do you feel bad when you walk into a place and you're like, gosh, if only you had called me sooner, we could have saved you so much money. But now I'm going to have to charge you a lot, but you could have saved so much. I think that's the issue, right? That early money can lead to a lot of saved money down the road. People just don't see it. We got to convince them, Matt. We got to convince them.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, I'm a grower. That's what I've been doing for 22 years of my life, and I love growers, right? And something that growers have is a very large ego, right? I had one as well. As well, okay? Like straight up, okay? And at the end of the day, it's like chefs. I always say the growers are like chefs. You know, I've worked in kitchens too, so I understand that vibe, right? And something I will say is like, I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to help you. And if you start to see noise on your COAs, give me a call and let's have a conversation, because at the end of the day, I'm not here to shun you or tell you don't know what you're doing. I'm here to help you so you nip it in the bud now and it doesn't cost your company either the company or their integrity, right? Just let's fix it. That's what I keep telling everybody. It's not about like if you know how to fix it or not. That's an ego thing, right? It's let the experienced people that do this for a living help you. That's all I can really say to that, you know?
I love it. Let the experience. Get Matt, get Canna Klean, cannaclean.com in there, right, to take care of it for that. Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for hanging out with me today. Thanks to Dan Treviante hooking us up there. Dustin's going to be so mad that he missed as well. Let's give a shout out to Dan. We love Dan and what he's doing out there with his company as well. So thank you, Matt, for joining us. Matt Iarussi, COO of CannAClean.com. Thanks for hanging out on the Because Cannabis podcast. We appreciate it. Hopefully get out there and clean up some facilities. Get us some nice clean weed. That's what we like. And Matt's like, I do all that. I don't even purchase it though. All that work that you do, you're like, that's my favorite part of your whole story. You're like, yeah, I'll do all this, but I'm still not buying your weed, bro. I'm still gonna grow my own. That's what
if I clean a spot, I may buy an eighth and try it out. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I'll give you that.
There you go.
I'll give you that. Yeah. You know, but yeah,
thank
you very much for having me, BC.
Hey, man, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. We will talk to you soon again, hopefully someday. And you guys sitting there at home, thank you for checking out the show today. We really appreciate it. Dustin, hopefully we'll get Dustin back here next week. This has been the Because Cannabis podcast, brought to you by Wayward Media. Brand new episodes every Wednesday, 4:20 p.m. on YouTube, Thursdays on Spotify, and anywhere that you listen to your audio podcast. We'll be back next week. More episodes, some new shows, got some great interviews lined up. Looking forward to it. See you guys soon.